Time Travel TPSP, Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Spicher. Marxism is a doctrine developed by Karl Marx promoting three vaguely related ideas: a philosophy, a theory of history, and an economic theory, as well as a political theory. In this relation, it refers to the focus of communism. Soviet Marxism was used after the Russian Revolution and was renamed soon to Marxism-Leninism. This is the model used in China at the time of my chosen novel. The Chinese Revolution took place in 1949 when Mao Zedong declared the creation of the PRC People's Republic of China. This ended the civil war between Communist China and the Nationalist Party, which started after World War I. This caused the U.S. to suspend international relation with the PRC for years to come, and it also caused distrust within citizens. Last Night at the Telegraph Club focuses on an immigrant family living in San Francisco in the 1954s. The story is full of twists and turns that gives you a fair insight into what it was like to live as this group of people at this time, but the main character is a girl named Lily. Lily is 17, born and raised in San Francisco. She's not only Asian American, but she is also discovering herself as a lesbian, dealing with the real conflicts that both groups would. This creates a plotline that deals with significant cultural and historical impacts. The plotline follows her family and herself as she meets her first love, named Kath. Kath introduces her to a place called the Telegraph Club, a gay club where her and Kath frequently sneak out to, eventually falling in love. Last Night at the Telegraph Club continued. She volunteers once at the request of her best friend to a youth Chinese organization. The FBI interrogates her father later about the relationship with another kid in the group who may be a communist. Her father gets his citizenship papers revoked with threat of deportation. This was a sad reality for many Chinese people at the time, that they would be accused of communism falsely based on that they were Chinese, or even vaguely related to someone who was or was suspected of being a communist. The Red Scare, they called it. This was rampant in San Francisco in the 1950s due to it having a substantial percentage of Asian and Chinese Americans. Accounts from first-hand activists include: the FBI would ring doorbells, talk to kids in the playground, tell lies to intimidate Chinese Americans to obtain information that would expose a person as a paper son. The targeted individual can then be arrested on immigration violations. The climax of the book occurs when the club gets raided, Kath gets arrested, and one of Lily's gossiping friends sees her leaving the club. Truth gets around to her parents and other members of the community. She runs away for a brief time, but eventually is sent away for her last year of high school and reunites with Kath afterwards. The problems in this book amount to a coming-of-age story with underlying struggles and racism and homophobia at the forefront. I had to answer 4 guiding questions. Those are addressed on the slides following. Lily was targeted and affected like any other Asian American living in the 1950s by the Red Scare, a period in the U.S. government was condemning communism, as well as the Lavender Scare from the LGBT community in the same decade. Culturally, Lily and her traditionalist family rejected and denied the fact of her being LGBT and influenced a lot of the stories, so the main plot was based around racial injustice. So her traditionalist family and the political racism of the government in that time and her family's denial and traditionalism. Yes, there would have undoubtedly been a POV change if Lily had lived currently. Her cultural story would not change that much, but with different threats now, but still prejudice against her race. People have become more accepting of the LGBT community now, therefore making it less common for traditional families to separate their kids from their lover. Still, it is as common as it was before. Lily was influenced by feelings of shame in relation to her LGBT discovery and self-exploration. The Lavender Scare fueled tensions, both that and the Red Scare being fueled by the Cold War. The police were trying to crack down on the growing LGBTQ community with no success. The homophobia rampant in every part of the world at this time displayed itself as raids in gay bars, limited self-exploration, and having to hide/sneak any form of correspondence with the community itself. Lily living in a place such as mainland China would influence the plot to shift from McCarthyism to Marxism, as the conflict itself would have been about the newly turned communist PRC. It would have been about the invasion of mainland China and the communist takeover instead of the influence of it in the US. I support Lily's decision, and she did the best thing that she could with the amount of time and the experience that she had. Putting in perspective her lack of experience in feminist situations, she didn't have much of a choice. She was extremely sheltered at 17 years old, which led her to discover complicated parts of her identity by herself. This was the 50s, so regardless of gender, any LGBT kid realizing and discovering themselves would most likely be discriminated against. In conclusion, being a gay Asian American teenager in the 50s more than sucked. Last Night at the Telegraph Club captures a perfect story of what many people faced, wanting truth and fiction alike, for a frightening glimpse into prejudice at that time. Thank you.